to Refuge Freedom Stories, brought to you by Refuge Ministries Canada. For the next half hour, your hearts will be filled with hope as you hear real-life stories of people who have been changed by the power of God. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to Refuge Freedom Stories. I'm your host, Johnny T., and today my guest is Tom Snow. Tom is a conservative Jewish Christian believer and an author that believes that there is one God, one true church, and that God's light dispels darkness and binarily separates truth from lies. His passion is to share what he's learned along the way to help equip other believers to learn to walk in the anointing and then stand in God's authority. He's the author of 2 books, The Daily Stand and Set the Captives Free. Tom, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. As I mentioned before our interview, I did listen to part of your testimony on another podcast, Couple of Nukes, a shout out to my buddy, Mr. Whiskey. And it was interesting when you talked about your journey of faith, and I want to start with that. I understand that you were healed of terminal cancer. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Okay. Well, when I was a teenager, God had gifted me with a good brain that was smart, but I didn't have any common sense. Of course, I was just a teenager.
That's right.
So this was back in the late 60s, and I had an ego the size of the moon and wanted to win my state science fairs. And so I had done it the year before, and that year I wanted to do it with something I was studying, late 60s, about asbestos dust. Car brakes were made with asbestos from probably the time cars were made in the early 1900s all the way up to maybe the 70s or 80s. Well, what they didn't think of was all of the asbestos dust flying into the air, and I studied it, and it came out to be 60 million tons of asbestos dust going into the air every year. And nowadays, we freak out if a ceiling tile breaks and it has asbestos, and we have hazmat come in suits and take that tile out. And here we were for all these years breathing brake dust. Gee, I wonder why we were getting sick.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things anyway. So I wanted to create an invention that would encapsulate around the brake systems on each of the 4 wheels on a car. And as you drove, would use the wind to gather that dust, put it into a sealed container in the back so it could be disposed of properly. So that was what I wanted to do. I created the invention. It worked. But I didn't want to take sawdust and try blowing that through because that doesn't weigh the same. So I went to the brake shops that had tons and tons of it laying around all over the floor. And they were like, take it. Like, they didn't have to sweep it up. I could sweep it up. So I would get bags and bags of brake dust and come back home, blow it through my unit, and prove that the unit worked. Of course, until the unit became sealed, there'd be clouds of dust flying all over the place, right?
Mm-hmm.
So not safe. So I had the intelligence to learn about asbestos and the problem and the need, and the scientific community understood that asbestos breaks down the lungs. Every fiber breaks an areola and kills it, and that in turn causes cancer and heart disease and other things. And so the studies were out there, but people weren't aware of it in terms of thinking about, every time I step on my brake, I'm putting this in the air and we're breathing it. But as I said, I developed this. My ego's big. I want to create an invention. I win my state science fair. I'm just on the ego heaven and not thinking with common sense. So I lived with my mother, my father, my 2 older brothers were away in college and military. I grew up in a family. I had Jewish heritage on both sides. Didn't know it until later because it was hidden because of the persecution of the Jews through the lineage. So my parents at World War II, with Hitler, there's a whole history of the family being murdered by Christian leaders. And so World War II comes, they go and hide on the southern Texas border. They spoke 5 languages each. They were ready to cross over the border and go hide in Mexico because they believed that Hitler had his spies in the U.S. and they were out looking for Jews. So living in fear. So they quote unquote became Christians. So at that point, no, they were still Jews. And so we grew up. I was raised in denominational churches, Presbyterian, Lutheran, but I never heard the gospel. I didn't know salvation. Somewhere along the way, my mother had met the Lord, and she was the rock in the family. She's the only one who really showed love back in the 60s. Mm-hmm. If my father wasn't mad at you, then you knew he loved you. There was no such thing as the words love. They just, that didn't come out. So he's a guy who disciplined with his belt or his fist. You know what I'm saying? So if you weren't on the bad end, you're good. So anyway, I'm doing these experiments in my basement. My mother's my cheerleader. She's working crazy hours, but she comes down and observes it and cheers me on. And she ends up getting cancer.
Mm.
And the cancer riddled through her body, and hysterectomy, double mastectomy, went into her lymph node system, settled into her liver, killed her. At that point, I took on the guilt of the world because I realized my lack of common sense had just killed my mother, the only source of love that I knew.
Mm-hmm.
But she wasn't afraid of death. She knew the Lord, but I didn't know the Lord yet.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a praying mother. It's always great when you have a praying mother or praying
Absolutely.
relative. And so I just took the guilt of the world. It was my fault, my stupidity, my ego that wanted to win the state science fair, create an invention, maybe get notoriety for my invention, blah, blah, blah. And I just killed my mother.
Mm.
That was the guilt of the world. So 1 month after she passes, I felt a rock hard thing inside my abdomen, about the size of a walnut. And as Christians nowadays, because the Holy Spirit can be telling you things. Well, I wasn't a Christian. I believed in God up there somewhere. I hadn't met him yet, but I knew because I knew that was cancer in my liver and knew I deserved it. I deserved to die. I killed my mother. I didn't deserve to live. So I didn't tell anybody about it. And it continued to grow as time went on. And it made me afraid because I didn't know where I was going for eternity. My mother knew. She wasn't afraid one moment. But here I was, and I'm facing death at 14, 15. And so not knowing what to do. And once again, having a praying mother and having the Lord who's a lot bigger than us, and we don't have to fit his patterns, doesn't have to all be church and, what we all believe it has to be. And so I began to see a vision. I'm not a Christian, but I began to see vision every single day. I would see a vision of cloud puffs. I'd close my eyes. I'd come home by myself after high school, sit in the family room, close my eyes, and I'd see a puff of clouds, line of clouds from one end of the horizon to the other. And it was just like little cotton balls, and they're all in a line. And I would stare to the furthest cloud on the left, and I would watch till slowly it floated to the center. And on top of each cloud was a scene in time. And I'd look up top of that cloud and I'd see a scene of life going on without me. And then I'd look at that cloud and I'd watch till it went totally off to the right horizon, go back, find the next one on the left horizon, wait till it floated overhead, looked at the scene on top, and there was a scene in life going on without me. And it told me two things. Eternity was real. It was going to happen. And number two is I wasn't the center of the world. When I died, life was going on without me. Scared the bejeebies out of me. Didn't know what to do with that. Just every day, daggone it, for 4 months, I saw a cloud. On top of the fear of death, now I have the fear of eternity. Where am I going for eternity? And so at the end, about that 4 months, I was sitting in the family room one day, watching the eternal progression of clouds, and I heard the audible voice of God. Now, we as believers, when we meet the Lord comes into our life, we ask him in. We can hear the still, small, quiet voice of the Lord anytime. It's available to us to talk to the Lord day in and day out, and I recommend all believers do. Now, you need to know how to talk to him right, because you got to separate the wrong voices from the right voices.
Correct.
So there's a whole thing in that. I've written a couple books, and the second one will talk clearly on how to hear that clear. The first one tells the whole story I'm telling you here in the beginning, and a lot more. I'm not here to promote the books. I'm just mentioning that for time's sake, we won't have time to cover all the details, how to hear the Lord correct. But in that moment, I heard the audible voice of God. Now you think, well, maybe he's just crazy. But literally when God spoke, it filled the room it sounded like roaring thunder. It was like rivers of living water come gushing forward, like John chapter 7, where Jesus said that the Holy Spirit in us would come from our innermost being and flow out like rivers of living water. And it just surrounded me with all of his volume, his presence. But the most important thing was, it surrounded me with love, a love that could not be compared. And I've felt the love of God a lot since I've been a believer, but never that much. It was his presence in that moment right there. And he said, I love you, and someday I'll provide your perfect mate for you. Now, the I love you made sense because I just felt this love. I mean, there's nothing on earth compared. My mother's love, which was wonderful, was just a tiny drop compared to him. The thing the devil can't do, he can't recreate that love, and he can't recreate the peace of God. Absolutely. Philippians 4:7, the peace that passes understanding, his peace, not a peace, the peace. When you have that peace. So I had that peace, I had that love. It was amazing. The second part about someday I'll provide a perfect mate for you made absolutely no sense. I'm doomed to be 6 feet under very shortly. Like, God, maybe you didn't get the memo, but I'm out of here pretty soon. So that second part, maybe you heard wrong. Maybe the angels didn't inform you that I'm out of here pretty quick. But the first part, I'm down. That's good. Well, when that left, it's like, okay, now how do I reach that God? I thought God was way out there, some far away, the church view, he's God way out. Now he was personal. He was real. But how do I reach him? And about a month later, my brother Bruce, middle brother, was in college, and he came home from college one day and sat my father and I down, told us to turn off the TV, and he told us a story about he was on an LSD trip. His friends had talked him into it. Second one, he had tried one a year prior, and he had flashbacks for 9 months. They talked him into the second one. He was never going to do it again. He got on this trip, and when he's on the trip and he's freaking out, he had heard the gospel, and he called out on the Lord, and he asked the Lord to save him. And the Lord instantly made him sober, took him down off the trip, and the Lord came in, and he had the fireworks. And he came home to tell us this. Well, this is the late 60s, and my father disciplined with the belt and the fist. Yeah. And literally, if he knew that Bruce was doing any kind of drugs, not LSD, not a big one, he literally would have beat him within an inch of his life. But Bruce came home and took a chance, because you don't make a joke like that. And he told us, and my father and I's jaws just hit the ground. My father couldn't do anything. But for me, it was tying 1 + 1 = 2. God, who had spoken to me, love. How do I get him? Bruce just got him. How do
Yeah.
So for the next day and a half, I hounded Bruce. I said, how do you meet the Lord? What's this about? What's that mean? He told me the gospel. He led me through the scriptures, told me to repent, ask the Lord to come into my life. I did all that. Didn't feel a thing. Bruce had the Star-Spangled Banner. It was the 4th of July. He always got the fireworks, and I got nothing, zilch, nada. Not a daggone thing. So now, on top of all this guilt, then all of a sudden feeling a little bit of hope when God spoke to me, I'm now dashed in anger, because now that was just my last hope, my last chance. It's over. And at that point, I just turned 16, and I became probably the biggest scuzzball you would never want to meet, because now the devil wanted to destroy me, and I was the green. And so I wanted to get a motorcycle to get the wind blowing in my face. If I had that, I know I'd feel free. I'd feel maybe something other than all this confusion, anger, hate, guilt. And so to get that, though, I had to talk my father into paying $200 to get a cheap little motorcycle for me. But to do that, I had to get a job. The only job available in that time was in food handling, 1970. And to get that, I knew I had to go down to the county clinic, get an x-ray and a blood test. Well, I knew the x-ray was going to show that my little tumor that had started the size of a walnut was now growing as large as a football, hard as a rock, in my abdomen. And I had hidden that. I was in sports, and I just gained extra weight to hide it, because I didn't want anybody to know. I didn't deserve to live. I didn't deserve a chance. Wanted to get to heaven, but I didn't deserve to live on earth. That was my view. And so I knew my secret would be out, because most likely they would tell my father, because the x-ray is going to show this big old monster tumor in my abdomen, and the blood test, depends on the level of blood test, could show cancer coursing through the body. Well, food handler's permit came in the mail. Cancer is not contagious. They're not going to not give you a food handler's permit for that. And was maybe a few days later, I wasn't even thinking about it, but I came walking home from school, and as I came in the front door, I saw my father's car in the drive, and normally he's gone 16-hour days working. And I thought that's pretty strange, but all of a sudden it hit me, and I knew because I knew he had gotten that letter that day. And so as I come walking in, there he is in the living room at the fireplace. He's building a fire. It's 80-some degree day in April. You didn't need a fire, okay? And he loves fires, but there's just no need. So I come walking in, and I see him, and as soon as I walk in the door, he took this letter in his hand, and he flips it into the fire. And I got really sarcastic, right? I'm just dealing with all those bad emotions. And I said, what's that? What you doing? I was burning trash. Well, what did you just put in the fire? Oh, nothing. What looked like a letter. It's just trash. Well, what's the letter about? Nothing. So I'm going, okay, well, my secret's out, and he's a hard rock. But maybe he couldn't literally put an arm around me, but maybe figuratively he could put an arm around me and comfort me in my last days. So I'm thinking, maybe this is good that it's out. Maybe someone knows my secret. Maybe it's going to be good. And so about a week later, I come walking home again, and his car's in the drive, and there's another car in the drive, and that's weird. And so come in and he says, Tommy, come in the living room. Come here. And he was sitting there with two insurance agents. And he says, sit down. Why don't you meet these people? Why don't you talk? I'm just going like, what in the heck is this? What is going on? I mean, it's like, seriously? So I'm playing it cool. I'm playing it calm. He acts like he just found out something I've already known for 6 months at this point. So I'm just thinking, well, maybe he's just going to take out a life insurance policy to bury me and maybe buy a case of beer and drown his sorrows. He just lost his wife, my mother, 6 months ago. Now he's going to lose his son. Maybe try to just play along. So I did, and the agents asked questions, and my father told the truth on whatever he could, but he lied in others, right? He's doing fraud to get this policy. And so in the end, the agents go, well, we need Tom to go see his doctor, get a clean bill of health, and then we can grant the policy. And my father goes, no. There's no need. Oh, no. Tommy's in sports. He has a physical all the time. He just had one 6 months ago, didn't you, Tom? And I'm like, well, that part was true. So I agreed. Yeah, I just had one. And he goes, I can get you a copy of that. Well, if you understand a boy's physical back in the day, it was height, weight, blood pressure, turn your head and cough. Yeah. That's it. There's nothing that detects cancer. And the agents, though, he fooled them with all of his dramatics. And so they said, yeah, get us a copy. Fine, we'll approve it. So it was approved. Well, instead of taking out just a few thousand to bury me, no, he took out what in today's economy would be worth millions. A life insurance. He's going to cash in on me. He's found out, and now this is how you treat your son, is you're going to retire on my death. So now my anger grew, now wrath, now unforgiveness. I mean, there are people, I'm sure, who are hurt worse than me. I think of trafficked children, and I can't comprehend how horrible that is. I have 5 children, and I would, don't take it wrong, but I'd kill anybody who ever tried to harm them. You know what I'm saying? I would defend my children all the way. So I think people have trauma worse than me, but this was my trauma. I'm living with the guilt of my mother's death, and now I have anger towards God who didn't show up when I asked him in. Now I have anger towards my father for fraudulently with this policy. I went off the deep end. The devil's like, hey, I got this guy. And I ended up starting drinking with my friends in high school. I'm 16. I became the second biggest drinker in my school. I bought a Harley in boxes. I built it into a chopper. I started riding with the Hells Angels. I was a scuzzball. You wouldn't want me to meet anybody you know, unless you really hate them, which we're not supposed to do. Anyway, I was so proud that I could drink a fifth of whiskey in 2 hours and then drive home on my motorcycle. And I would literally find myself across 4 lanes of traffic on the wrong side, almost in the ditch, waking up to then be pushed back across 4 lanes, almost to the other ditch on the other side, to then wake up, find myself 4 lanes back over here and go back. And there were a lot of badly bruised angels, I believe, in that day that were pushing me back and forth. I should have been dead, but I had a praying mother. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the Lord who was gracious. And he didn't look at me based on I have to be this good person. I just had to be, I am who I am. He takes us good, bad, and ugly. Well, I lived that for the next 8 months. My life was going down the tubes. At this point, I'm so angry, I'm just waiting for it to end. And I had decided that I was going to blackmail my father. As soon as my Harley would run right, because it would always break down, I couldn't leave the city and was always rebuilding it every week. But I had decided as soon as that thing was running smooth, I was going to blackmail my father. I was going to tell him, I know about your fraud. I know about what you did with the insurance company. I want so many thousands of dollars so I can take my Harley and go cross country for my last little hurrah. And that was my plan. What I didn't tell him, and I lived in Columbus, Ohio, I was going to drive out to the Grand Canyon in Colorado, and I was going to drive my Harley off. I was going to write it right off because if I was dying on my terms. I was so angry, I couldn't live with all the hate in me, and I was going to take my Harley off. But I also was so angry and so mean now inside that I planned on writing a letter and tucking it inside my clothes so that when they picked up the pieces at the bottom, it would tell about my father's fraud to the insurance company so that he would lose the payout. He would lose the money I had blackmailed him on. And then my sincere hope was that he would go to jail. That's how much evil resided in me. And so at the end of about this 8 months of going through this horrid turmoil, I was sitting there one night with my biker buddy gang, and we were sitting on our bikes, drinking bottle after bottle of cheap wine. And we're drunk. And we would get into discussion and we'd talk about anything. But this night we got into a spiritual discussion. And I told him what happened to Bruce. I was expecting them to scoff and mock and carry on. And I was ready to mock with them. He asked the Lord to come in his life and he got the Star Spangled Banner. And he came down off of this trip, this LSD trip. And they didn't laugh. So then I told him my story. Yeah, I asked the Lord to come in my life and he didn't come in at all. He didn't do nothing. Nothing happened. And in the moment I said that, I was wrong. I knew he was there. And the God of the universe, the one who loved me, who told me he loved me, had actually come in on the day I asked. That's what it says. It says we're sealed with the promised Holy Spirit until the day of redemption. And he came into my spirit and sealed it. But what we don't know is our spirit, we don't feel from our spirit. It's deep inside us. We feel from our soul, our heart, our mind, our thoughts, our feelings. He was down in our spirit. We didn't know we were dead in our spirit the day before we asked the Lord into our life. And we don't know we're alive. We go, well, maybe in that moment, but for some, not for me. But for a lot of us, there's plenty of times in our life where we're going, God, where are you? I don't feel you. Well, that's because he seals our spirit deep within. Jesus said it's in our innermost being, John chapter 7. And so from there, I had so much garbage blocking him, so much guilt, anger, hate, unforgiveness that I was blocking. It was me. But in that moment, I knew I was wrong. In that moment, I was sobered like Bruce had been sobered. In that moment, I told my friends, I got to go. And I drove home safe that night. I appreciate the angels being there and helping. And so the next day, I never drank again as a teenager. I mean, I drink responsibly as an adult now, but I was a teenage alcoholic and I didn't drink for many years at that point. And so I never drank again. I began telling everybody about the love of the Lord. I was a 1970 hippie scuzzball motorcycle guy with hair halfway down my back. And at the high school, they knew this crazy guy you don't want to be around. All of a sudden, he's a Jesus freak. He's telling everybody about the Lord and how wonderful he is. And they're probably like, this guy's crazy. But he is. Like, he went from one pendulum swing to the other. But that was okay. Because now I knew where I was going. I was no longer afraid of dying. Dying was a given. I knew where I was going. God loved me. And for the moment, I compartmentalized. I pushed aside all the guilt, anger, hate. I wasn't thinking about that anymore. It was all shoved into the shadows to be dealt with down the road. But in that moment, it had nothing, no rule in me. And I began to seek after the Lord. And he led me from one place to another till I landed in the church that he wanted me to grow up in. It was the early charismatic move. And we just saw miracle after miracle, the power of God, the presence of God. We could worship for 4 hours. You'd think it was minutes. You'd see people come up to the altar for prayer. You'd see 5-year-olds praying for them. They'd fall out and people would be healed. Like, God's God. And you don't have to go to the altar. You don't have to go to church. I think there's no rules in God's world. We make rules. That makes it difficult. He does have order. We are supposed to study the word. His word be true, but all of our constructs that we make that are man-made belief systems are not. They're not right. His word's true. And I'm not saying churches are bad. I think it's a good thing. You need to get founded. You need to have oversight. You need to have protection. So I was getting all that. I was growing, studying the word, having a great time, learning from the Lord, studying the word. Now I'm talking to him daily and with that still small, quiet voice. We all can have that. Having a great time because, hey, I'm dying. I'm going home to be with Papa soon. It ain't a big deal. I was already dying. Now I know where I'm going. And I know that place where my mother was, which she wasn't afraid. I am not afraid. I'm dying. Who cares? And there'd be altar call. And I didn't feel like I was supposed to go up. I wasn't running to the altar. Now, I know there's a lot of people who run to the altar all the time. You know, we ask for prayer. There's nothing wrong with that, but we're not supposed to seek the healing. We're supposed to seek the healer.
Correct.
And if we seek the healer, the healing is, if he chooses to do it, that's up to him, not up to us. So don't seek the healing, seek the healer. And so I wasn't seeking the healing. I wasn't running up. I mean, I saw people. Matter of fact, I was up there praying for people, watching them get healed, and I wouldn't get healed. I don't care. Paul said, to live is Christ, to die is gain. I was ready to go home with Papa. I'm ready to die and have that gain. Like, I'm ready. And so I was studying the word, having a great time. And this rock hard tumor, still the size of a football inside of me, been in there a year and a half at this point. No big deal. So one night I was riding home on my motorcycle from our meeting. We had meetings back in that day, 6 days a week, twice on Sunday, and talking to the Lord, which is just normal. And So as I did, the Lord said, do you see in Isaiah where I said, by his stripes you are healed? And I went, yeah. He says, well, do you see in 1 Peter where I said, by his wounds you were healed? I went, yeah. He says, Isaiah was looking forward to the cross. Peter was looking back to the cross. He said, I completed everything at the cross. I went, yeah, right. I understand. I see what you're saying. He says, would you like to receive that healing? I'm like nonchalant, ready to go home, be with Papa. I'm like, whatever. Sure, I don't care. Like, I'm going home soon. In that moment, I felt something. And in the next 24 hours, the rock-hard tumor that had grown from the size of a walnut to larger than a football melted, dissipated, was gone from my abdomen. My abdomen turned to normal.
That's incredible, yeah. So before we move on here, I want to let you know that we're past our time on the interview, but I want to make a two-part interview with you, if that's okay. So if people want to find out more about your writings, your books, where would they go?
You can go to my website. It's just beclear.com. There you can read about the book, and you can also go out to my Substack, which is justtobeclear.substack.com, and you can learn, you get posts and podcasts and learn other things.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and God bless you and all you do for him.
Saved, filled, healed by the blood of the Lamb, sanctified, his child I am. He will walk with me, his power will set me free, strength in his name, seeking no gain, choosing the cross. Brokenness, holy to God. Walk through fire, with his shoes I'm shod. He will walk with me until full victory, taking his shame, asking no gain for my own.
I hope that you have enjoyed the last half hour. Thank you again to Refuge Ministries Canada for hosting the show. So until next time, may God richly bless you with peace, love, and happiness.
We at Refuge Ministries are so blessed by the success of Refuge Freedom Stories and podcasts. In addition, we focus on youth prison ministry, release kits, and many other diverse outreaches to the needs of our community. As a nonprofit, there are many costs involved, however, and we are asking for your support. Financial gifts can be made via our website at www.refugeministriescanada.com or by calling 519-701-0108. Your giving makes this work possible, and we thank you in advance for your support. That's 519-701-0108. God bless you.